context, in the context of the long-term stagnation in wages, stagnation in productivity, stagnation in investment, those figures are pretty dire for Johnson.
But presumably pretty difficult to predict, especially when you don't know what kind of trade deal you do with the EU or any other country. And Mike Pompeo today has been over talking to the Prime Minister and gave him perhaps a little bit of a lift by saying that we do believe that we can do a trade deal pretty quickly within the year.
That was actually a very interesting moment because obviously UK-US relations have been tarnished somewhat by the whole Huawei affair, where America threatened it, said you were betraying the legacy of Margaret Thatcher, you would be giving away your national sovereignty if you let Huawei in, and then suddenly we make this decision and Mike Pompeo, who's a big figure in all this in DC, comes and says, okay, we think it's wrong, but we'll respect it and get on with it there. And he was very keen at this event when he was in London today to talk about the gold standard of trade deals that the US wants to do with the UK. And what I think is going to be interesting is the UK will try and do this in parallel. They'll do the EU deal while also trying to do the US deal, and Australia and all sorts of other countries as well. But as Grace was saying, fundamentally, all the things Boris Johnson wants to do are not about trade deals. It's about domestic politics at home, because the people who voted for Brexit, they want better roads, better railways, better infrastructure, things which he has promised to deliver.
So his message is Brexit allows us to focus now on...
Well, the fact Brexit is done now, the fact that we're not talking about this thing, and this phrase we're starting to hear incessantly, levelling up, which has obviously come from some focus group in a marginal seat somewhere, because that's what he's going to be saying in his broadcast, that now we've left the EU, we can focus on these other things. But if the trend growth rate is going to be 1.1%, there's simply not going to be enough money for that to happen, because the kind of investment and progress the country needs is not going to be met by that. So I actually think over the next year, the biggest constraint from Boris Johnson is going to be the economy, not trade deals and Brexit.
OK, and very briefly, just going to take a quick look at the Sun's front page finally. Another one to focus on the day tomorrow, and they got their focus on Big Ben without any scaffolding on it at 11 o'clock tomorrow night. Our time has come. And again, that symbol of a big moment when Britain leaves the EU after so many years.
Yeah, and, you know, we've obviously got our souvenir coins, the Sun there, with 100 souvenir 50p coins to be won, which is probably the most exciting thing that's going to come out of the events tomorrow. Because, you know, as we've been saying, it does seem like the day itself will be fairly low-key in an attempt by Johnson, by the government, to kind of paper over some of the tensions between Remainers and Leavers and bring the country forward. But, you know, as we've been saying, there are a lot of challenges ahead, whether it comes to the economy, whether it comes to negotiating a series of trade deals as the junior partner. What you were saying about the US there, you know, ultimately, the UK is going into this series of negotiations in a very weak position relative to the United States. So, you know, there is still a huge amount to be decided. It's not that surprising that the triumphalism is largely being reserved for the front pages of some of the tabloids.
OK, we're going to take a break right now. Sorry, Sebastian, I can see your mouth opening, but I'm afraid you have to hold it just till after the break. Plenty more to talk about, including Wuhan airlift, the rescue mission to bring back 150 Brits. We've got more on that in a moment.
Opening time. Shops have tried to enforce a system of rationing, handing out slips of paper to people, first come, first served, as they waited, entitling the holder to buy just one box of masks once stores opened. And the Australian government has defended its decision to send its citizens for 14 days to a quarantine centre on Christmas Island if and when they are evacuated from China's virus-hit Hubei province. Christmas Island is an Australian territory in the Indian Ocean, which has been used to hold asylum seekers and foreign criminals facing deportation.
The reality is that people need to be accommodated somewhere for up to 14 days. I can't clear out a hospital in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane. I don't have a facility otherwise that we can quickly accommodate for what might be many hundreds of people. And Christmas Island is purpose-built for exactly this scenario. So we can isolate people within the centre from those that are living on Christmas Island otherwise. It's obviously a Commonwealth facility. We have the ability to leverage off the medical services that we already have in place there. Well, look, ultimately, our government will do what's in the best interests of Australia and Australians, and we're doing that here. We've got Australians who are in distress. We're offering to bring them out of that part of China and to bring them back home, but we want to make sure that they're through the isolation period, and I think the steps that we've taken are appropriate.
Some of the wreckage from the crash that killed NBA star Kobe Bryant and his daughter has been transported to Phoenix, Arizona. Aerial footage showed a parked trailer with what is reportedly wreckage from the crash. The National Transportation Safety Board have finished their investigation at the scene of the crash in Calabasas, California. Now parts of the aircraft will be examined off-site.
Breakfast live from Leeds from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. So let's go back into the papers, and the other story, which obviously will have a lot of coverage tomorrow, is the continuing concerns about the coronavirus. You've picked out, it's The Sun, page 9, and they're talking about the Brits who are being airlifted tonight from Wuhan, at the centre of the epidemic in China, back to Britain.
Indeed, because the city of Wuhan was closed down and there was no knowledge of what was going on in there. The Chinese authorities were typically very silent about this, and there was this concern for what's happening to all these Brits. How do they get home? The government has arranged to get them home. They're setting off pretty much now, I think, and will arrive home this time tomorrow morning, and then they're going to be quarantined on the Wirral, where they've built this huge, which you can see, I think, some pictures in some of the papers tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a double page spread in the Mirror as well.
That's right, yeah. Of preparing this centre where they're going to be isolated and watched carefully, because the fact is, as The Sun highlights, the World Health Organization has declared a major global crisis over this, and although the UK has not had confirmed cases here, they're very nervous that that doesn't happen, because it's spread incredibly quickly, including in China, in Singapore, in Japan, places all around Asia. So it's kind of scary how quickly this thing goes. I guess the only good thing is that the WHO did praise China, saying they've reacted much more quickly than with SARS or avian flu, when that had spread, been much more honest with their assessment and information about. At the same time, this thing is, it's incredibly contagious, and so everyone's very cautious. They don't want this developing in the UK, but ultimately, when you speak to people in the Department for Health and health service professionals, they say it's a case of when, not if, because of international travel and because of all the experience of how these diseases get around so quickly.
Yeah, and one of the big things about this virus is, of course, the fact that it is contagious before you're showing any symptoms, which is why these 150 people are being...
Stored for like a week or so.
Yeah, for quite a while. So these 100 people are going to be put away for 2 weeks in what is actually apparently former student accommodation on the Wirral, which, is going to be obviously quite traumatic for them. They'll apparently have some access to the internet and be able to talk to their families, but that is, going to happen until at least they know that these people aren't carrying the virus. The total number of people globally who've been affected are, according to this piece, just over 8,000.
And the vast majority in China still.
The vast majority in China, but there have been cases in many other countries. We've seen in the US, France, Germany now, and it does seem to be, as Seb was saying, a question of when, not if.
And we should say as well that the UK has raised the risk assessment from this from low to moderate, and they're saying that's partly to escalate the planning and preparation. They say we're advising an increase of the UK risk level from low to moderate. This doesn't mean we think the risk to individuals in the UK has changed at this stage, but the government should plan for all eventualities. So that's the British side of things.
Yeah, it's that declaration of the public health emergency from the World Health Organization, I think, is suggesting to governments you need to start planning for, for a worst case scenario, basically, just in case, putting preparations in place, spending some money on this, because it will reach you at some point.
Okay. I think the worst case scenario is this cruise ship, which is off the coast of Italy, where it's got 7,000 people on board. There's a Chinese woman who was ill and thought might have caught this virus, and they were going to let these people on board, and it was the local mayor who drove there and said, "Stop! Don't do that. We need to check this properly," because that's what governments are really worried about, is trying to control the movement of this thing as much as possible away from how bodies and immune systems cope, and also human error.
Okay, we will leave it there. But Grace and Sebastian, thanks very much indeed for taking us through the papers tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you.